Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're headed to 15th century Florence. You know, the city that just glitters in our imagination.
I mean, it's celebrated as the birthplace of the Renaissance, right? This incredible explosion of art, philosophy, and commerce that basically shaped the entire Western world.
And if you read what people were saying back then, like the humanist Leonardo Bruni, you'd think it was this perfect city-state, famed for its freedom, its liberty. But here's the thing. Was that really the whole story?
Okay, to get what was really going on, we need to look at the people who are actually building this so-called Golden Age. And that story, well, it all comes down to one family, the Medici.
They started out as wool merchants, nothing too special, but everything changed when they founded their bank in 1397. Over just 3 generations, they completely mastered a new kind of power. It wasn't about having a crown or a fancy title. Nope, it was all about money, debt, and who you knew. From Giovanni to Cosimo, and then to the legendary Lorenzo the Magnificent, they pretty much became the unofficial kings of Florence.
And they had this absolutely genius tool for locking down their influence, patronage. You know, sponsoring all the big names, Michelangelo, Botticelli. But here's the clever part. It wasn't just about making beautiful things. No, every single painting they commissioned, every chapel they built, it was like a masterclass in PR. It was a way to flex their wealth, show off how pious they were, and basically make their power look like it was blessed by God himself.
And this table just lays it all out, the central illusion of the whole era. On paper, Florence was a republic, right? It had elected officials, councils, the whole shebang. But in reality, the Medici were pulling every single string. They decided who got elected. They made all the important calls in private meetings. They were funding kings across Europe, even the Pope. And the whole time, they kept up this act of being just, simple private citizens. Incredible.
So here's the crucial point. While Lorenzo the Magnificent is busy hanging out with poets and throwing money at masterpieces, a totally different reality is unfolding for most people in Florence, right outside his palace walls.
Which brings us to a really critical question, one that kind of turns the whole story we think we know on its head. Was this golden age of art and enlightenment actually golden for everybody?
The short answer? Not even close. For one thing, Florence was basically a city haunted by death. The Black Plague had already wiped out more than half its people. And then, these recurring outbreaks just kept the population stuck around 40,000. So this magnificent city, it was literally a shadow of its former self.
And the money? Oh, it was all concentrated at the very top. Get this, a survey from 1427 showed that just 100 families, that's less than 1% of everyone living there, controlled a full quarter of the city's entire wealth. Meanwhile, pretty much everyone else was poor. You had this really weak middle class, which is a recipe for serious social instability.
So you can see how, underneath that shimmering, beautiful surface, the city's foundations were just cracking. They were fighting these endless wars that left the state totally bankrupt. Even the famous Medici Bank itself was starting to fail. And all that anxiety about money, it just fueled this massive moral panic. You had preachers on street corners yelling about the sins of the rich, condemning their decadent lifestyles. It was a total powder keg of fear and resentment.
And this simmering crisis, well, it was the perfect breeding ground for a new, powerful, and frankly radical voice to rise up from all that chaos.
And that voice? It belonged to a man named Girolamo Savonarola. He was a Dominican friar, and when he came to Florence, he looked at all this crisis, and he didn't see a political problem or an economic one. No, he saw divine punishment. God punishing the city for its vanity, its decadent art, and its sin. So, when the Medici were finally kicked out in 1494, Savonarola just swooped in and filled that power vacuum. He was an absolute master at this. He tapped right into all that public anger, pointing the finger at the Medici's luxury. And he offered a really simple, really dramatic solution: purge the city of all its worldly temptations. He even organized the city's youth into a kind of moral police force, which led to the infamous bonfire of the vanities. Just imagine it, priceless art, books, beautiful clothes, all of it just going up in flames.
Now, Savonarola's whole reign of fire and brimstone, it didn't last long. In fact, he was executed just 4 years later. And the irony? It happened in the exact same square where he held his bonfires. But that cycle of crisis and brilliance that really defined Florence, that was far from over.
See, the Medici actually came back. They returned to power and ruled for another couple of centuries.
But eventually, all family lines come to an end, and by 1743, it was all down to the last heir, a woman named Anna Maria Luisa de' Medici. And this is where we get the final, absolutely brilliant twist in the entire Medici saga. In 1737, Anna Maria Luisa signed something called the Patto di Famiglia, the Family Pact. With this one legal document, she gave the entire, unimaginable Medici collection, all the art, the jewels, everything, to the state of Tuscany. But there was one crucial condition. It could never, ever leave the city of Florence. So, what's the big takeaway here? It's that the Florentine Renaissance wasn't this peaceful, stable, golden age we imagine. Not at all. It was tense, it was volatile, and honestly, it was often brutal. All that magnificent art that we still admire today, it was literally forged in a crucible of plague, shocking inequality, bankruptcy, and religious fanaticism.
Ultimately, the story of Florence is a powerful reminder that history is never as simple as it looks. And it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? What other uncomfortable truths are hiding just beneath the surface of all those other famous golden ages we read about in the history books?